All right, guys, so welcome to our blind tasting webinar. This is the fifth Friday that we are together, and I cannot believe it is the fifth Friday. You know, when we did the first one, it appears we will be just 2 weeks in lockdown, so this is the fifth Friday already, and we will continue to do that as long as needed, okay? So we have been doing webinars at the Florida Wine Academy every Wednesday and every Friday. On Wednesday, you can see Nicole Ramos. She's here in the chat box as well. So Nicole, say hi. And aside from that, we are doing the DipWSET courses via webinar. So actually, we are very busy at the moment. I'm doing level 3 every Monday. Then Nicole and Celeste say hi as well. Celeste and Nicole are teaching level 2 every Thursday night, so we are pretty busy. Basically, we are teaching every night. So if you don't have anything to do, we can keep you busy, okay? I promise that. All right, let me just see something in here. So yes, I think, all right. Yes, thank you, Nicole. I see that you sent the last email for the person asking for the link. All right, so if you're attending the webinar for the first time, welcome. My name is Alessandra Esteves. I will introduce myself in a minute. Couple of things before we start. If you have the wines, you can open them. They are all red, no peeking, okay? Wine number 2 is under screw cap, so don't use a wine key. Otherwise, just open your wines and keep the bottles wrapped as this in here. And we'll talk about this in a second, okay? So open your wines, make sure they are all open so we can start in a few minutes. So how does this webinar start? So you can see the speaker, I can talk, and I can chat with you guys. But you as an attendee, I don't see you, I don't hear you. The only way to communicate with us is through the chat box. So any questions, anything, let me know. And please, again, when you send the questions, send to all panelists and all attendees. And in that case, you know, Celeste and Nicole, if I don't see any question, they can reply. And they can help me in here because sometimes it gets very busy with a lot of people that we have for the webinars, okay? All right, and if you don't know me already, or if this is your first time, my name is Alessandra Esteves. I began my corporate career as a lawyer, and then I decided to write about wine. I have the diploma in wine and spirits, which is the level 4 of the DipWSET. I have some other certifications, such as the French Wine Scholar, Certified Specialist of Wine. I am now working, I'm a Master of Wine candidate, so I'm studying to you know, for an exam. And I see a couple of people in here are studying together with me. So Adele is from my tasting group. And then I see Shanna in here. We met before during a border trip. Yes, and we are all working on that. For the Florida Wine Academy, I am the Director of Wine Education and the co-founder. So a couple of fun things that we do at the Florida Wine Academy. Of course, we teach wine classes, sake and spirits classes. We do also Miami Champagne Week, which I'm kind of seeing, okay, should I plan for that? Is this too soon? It is every October. So hopefully we'll have a great Miami Champagne Week. We did have Vino Summit, our wine conference, before all this happened. So it seems like it was, you know, 3 years ago. It was just a month ago. So, and yes, we do this. We keep you very busy, okay? So I have a great surprise for you guys. And I don't know even how to start. I'm nervous. I will introduce you to one of the panelists we'll have for today. So it is not only me. We have Nick Jackson, Master of Wine, and I'll tell you how I met him and, you know, what he has been doing for us Master of Wine candidates. So Nick, if you can, so yes, this is Nick Jackson, and if you can unmute your microphone, so, and people also, if they can see you.
You have to do the video.
Yeah, I cannot, still not hear you.
Hold on. Hey,
Jessica. So let's give a minute. Sometimes the microphone takes a while to connect. Let me unmute you in here. Okay.
You just have to allow me to, you have to see me. It's your choice, it's not mine on the video. You can hear me, but you can't see me, but that's not mine. That's up to you. You have to do it.
Okay, so let me, I cannot hear him. So a couple of people are texting here that they can hear you, Nick. Maybe it is just not me. Let me check. All right.
Everyone can hear me apart from Alessandra.
Yes, now I can hear you. Okay. So let's see, because now we must see you too.
Okay, you just got to allow me to be seen.
Yes. So sorry about that. So I did this in the afternoon. So okay. All right, found it. Sorry about that. Yay!
Hi everyone.
Welcome, Nick. Very happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here. Thank you.
So if you can, please introduce yourself, and then we'll talk about a little bit of, you know, everything that you've been doing.
Yes. You can see some information about me there on the screen. I've worked with Alessandra and a lot of other Master of Wine students in this country over the past few years. I passed the Master of Wine exam in 2019, just last year. I started in 2015, so it was about a 4-year process. And after I passed last year, I spent most of the year writing a book based on my experiences of the Master of Wine program, and particularly about the tasting part of the exam, which is really, I think for most people, the hardest part of the exam. And I thought that's where I could contribute something. So I wrote this book. I think most of you who are watching this know that already. My book about blind tasting called Beyond Flavor. And this book is really, I really intended it for Master of Wine students, WSET, higher level, maybe diploma level students, and quartermaster sommelier students. And it, we'll talk a little bit more about it in a minute, but it's been something which I think since I released it in January, people have found useful in their studies. So I think what we're going to do today is base the blind tasting off the things I talk about in the book.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nick. So the story about the book, at least for myself, is that we were studying, and I do have a tasting group here in Miami. So one of the ladies sent me this link, and so, you know, we bought the book, and as soon as we start reading, everybody read the book in 24 hours because we couldn't stop, right? It is a new way of tasting blind that has helped us immensely. And you know, when we finished the book, we all sat together and say, why, you know, no one just did that before, right? It seems so obvious. It seems so logical. So why has, you know, disappeared only right now? So we call it the Bible. So thank you. So, you know, my book, it's just like this, because I keep on getting back to the book all the time. So I read once first before the seminar in January, and then we keep on getting back to it all the time because it is super helpful. And as I was preparing for tonight, I did, you know, again, use the book. So yes, it's called Beyond Flavor. It is available on Amazon, right? And we can put the link in here for people. and it is super helpful, and it is a completely new way. So, so actually, Nick Jackson should be in Miami today. We had a weekend of wine tastings scheduled for this weekend, actually. So he couldn't be in Miami today, but you know, luckily you're here in spirit at least, or virtually, right?
Instead, I'm in Middletown, Ohio, which is beautiful, but about 60 degrees colder and probably a lot wetter than where you are.
Right, and I tried sending Nick the wines as well, but apparently it's very hard to ship wines to Ohio, and I couldn't find a good wine shop in Middletown. So yes, next time. So yes, Zé from Brazil is saying, send Nick Jackson a safe boat after MW seminar. I know. So I also am MW candidate based in Brazil and the Netherlands. So yes, it is very helpful for all of us. So let's see how we did this. Yes, so this is the presentation for Florida Wine Academy. And yes, we do have the 305 wines. So some of you bought the wines from us. Thank you so much. You know, this is a small family business, so it counts, it helps. So the traditional way of tasting wines, and you know, if you have been to one of our classes, you have seen this before. So the traditional way of blind tasting, first you see the color of the wine, and that, you know, will tell you probably what is, you know, you can imagine what is the grape, and if it is a thick skin grape, or if it is a thin skinned grape. Then you have the aromas, and you put your nose inside the glass and try to see if it is black fruit, red fruit, what kind of aromas, the flavors on the palate, and then of course you see the structure. So is the acidity medium plus, or is the acidity high or low? So that is the traditional way that we use in classes for tasting wine, okay? So do you want to comment on any of this, Nick, or can I just go on?
No, I mean, would you say as a teacher of WSET that is the WSET approach?
It is. Right. It is the WSET approach. It is very helpful. And of course, you know, color does tell you a lot, especially with aging, but you always have to confirm with the nose, and then always have to confirm with the structure and the palate. So, but yes, that is basically the WSET. So if we work with level 2 students, with level 3 students, even diploma level, that is what people expect, right?
Yeah, and there is a lot of emphasis on ticking off all the boxes. We have to talk about color, and we have to talk about aromas and flavors, and then we can make a sensible guess about what the wine is. But sometimes I find that approach a bit of a straitjacket, because sometimes color just isn't that important, for instance, and you have to write your 2 or 3 marks about color, and it's a waste of time, honestly.
True. Yeah, and so I wanted to show you guys a table in here with 4 major red grapes. Okay, so everybody knows these grapes. So Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Malbec, and Shiraz. Same grape, just different spelling, different writing. And, you know, let's look at the color first. So Merlot can be medium ruby, Cabernet deep ruby, and then Malbec deep purple, and Shiraz deep purple. Well, depending on the climate, your Merlot can be quite deep ruby as well, right? So if you have all the wines deep and all of them, you know, kind of ruby and purple, so that is not helpful. You're not identifying anything. So now go to the wine number 1 if you have, so pour the wine number 1 in your glass just for us to look at the color. And, you know, so you can pour the wine number 1 in here. And I'll show you the color for those of you who do not have the wine in front of you. So, and we can try to see what is the color. It is pretty deep, I would say. And guys, you can send in the chat box, you know, so it is pretty deep. And, you know, it is always that discussion that we have for level 3. Is this ruby or is this purple, right? So I'm seeing, I think, a little bit more purple. So yes, only by the color, would you say that you know what the grape is?
I think it's impossible from my perspective just to do that by color. I mean, you know, to give you an example, just supposing for the sake of argument, we thought that it was Merlot. I remember talking to Christian Moex, who, as many of you know, is the owner of many of the greatest right bank properties in Bordeaux, in Pomerol and Saint-Emilion. And he draws this comparison between red fruit vintages and black fruit vintages. So we're talking about his Merlot wines. Basically, every wine he makes is at least 75% Merlot. And so he has the idea that red fruit vintages in Pomerol and Saint-Emilion are cooler, less ripe vintages. And black fruit vintages are the really opulent, ripe, spicy, dense vintages. So yes, I understand exactly what you're saying when you talk about the fact that, for instance, Merlot might have red fruits, or it might be medium ruby. But maybe in a warmer vintage in Bordeaux, just to take one example, it would be deeper colored and it would have dark fruits.
Right. And that is, you know, in Bordeaux. So, and then if we go into the New World and to warmer climates like California or maybe, you know, Australia or the South America, then it is never going to be medium ruby in color for a Merlot, and we'll have a lot of black fruits as well. Okay.
Let's just talk about one question. Antonia is asking a very sensible question. Can we use color to exclude some varieties? I think you probably can. When you're looking at the wine in your glass right now, you know that it's not going to be Pinot Noir, unless it's a really crazy example. It's probably not going to be single variety Grenache. It's probably not going to be Nebbiolo. But, you know, I've seen oaked Barolo in New French Barriques, which has got a pretty deep color. I've seen blended Grenache, even with 10% of something else. Remember, there's a lot of winemakers out there who think that a pale color is a massive failing, and they will add anything to make their wines deeper color. And so, yes, you can, but the problem with excluding varieties in a blind tasting is that you can't remember which ones you've missed. So you can exclude the Pinot Noir and the Nebbiolo, but then you forget that Sangiovese, 100%, can also be very pale colored, or Aglianico, or Grenache from Australia. So you think that it would actually be a deductive, logical way of doing it, but in fact, there's so many things that you would have to remember to do that. It's more, I think it's more helpful to be positive, to say, what could this actively be? Because you can never eliminate every possibility. You just can't think of it, especially under exam pressure.
True. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It is, yeah, it is, you know, a good way, but it's not the only way. And also then go into the aroma and flavor. So yes, Merlot, basically red fruits. That is how we learn for level 1, level 2, level 3, the diploma, right? So basically red fruits. But yes, in hotter vintages, in warmer vintages like Bordeaux, take 15, 16. So you can have a little bit of black fruit as well. So, and then if you compare the aromas of Malbec and then Shiraz, you can have black fruit in Shiraz as well. You can have blueberries in Malbec, which is very common actually. So basically all of these 4 grapes can have this black fruit aromas. So again, how can you differentiate? Yes, and Cabernet Sauvignon, we always tell it is the green bell pepper note. But Merlot can be minty. So, you know, the minty eucalyptus of the Cabernet Sauvignon, how you differentiate that, you know, again, just by smelling and saying, no, this is definitely Cabernet Sauvignon, or this is definitely Merlot. So there is more to the game than only looking at the color, only looking at the flavors and trying to guess what the wine is.
I totally agree, as you're about to see.
All right, so smell the wine. So we are working on wine number 1. So smell the wine and tell me if you find something, you know, if it is first more red fruit or black fruit. What are you tasting, Nick, by the way? Oh, you cannot say.
No, I can say I'm really tasting the closest is to wine 3.
Okay, good. All right, so guys, what do you think? Do you see any red fruits or black fruits, any spices or flowers? What can you smell? Okay, so red fruit for Nancy, for Mary, for Claudia, very fruity, okay. Eucalyptus for Anne, okay. Red fruits and green pepper for Rob, okay. Oh, okay. Blueberries, cocoa, green bell pepper. So you're all over the place, basically. So you look at these boxes with aromas, and I can see that some of you have more the aromas of Merlot, some of you have more the aromas of Cabernet Sauvignon, and so on. So I don't want to know what the wine is right now, okay? So let's move forward. So again, in the traditional way of tasting, we will look at the acidity, right, and the tannins. So theoretically, Cabernet Sauvignon has high acidity and high tannins, okay? So it is always high. And the other grapes are more medium, but they can be high as well. So you see Syrah over here, medium acidity, high tannins. You know, in the Northern Rhone, acidity can be medium plus even. And then for Malbec, medium acidity, medium to high tannins. It depends. Are you in Argentina, in Valle de Uco, or are you in Cahors? So that will depend on the climate and the region as well. So even though the structure appears to be definitive, it is not. So go ahead and taste the wine and just try to think about tannin level and acidity, okay? So Paula says, high acidity, high alcohol. Yeah, I agree with the high acidity. The alcohol does burn a little bit, yes. Medium plus tannin for Paula. Roberto says medium acidity, medium plus tannins, okay. Nancy says high acidity, medium tannins. Yes, high and long finish. Yes, Lucy. Yeah, so then again, you know, everybody is perceiving something different. I would say this wine has high acidity. It might be because of the grape, it might be because of the climate, and the tannins are not high. So every time I think about high tannins, I think about Nebbiolo. So Barolo is my go-to, right? Are these tannins as high as a Barolo? No, they're not close to a Barolo. So yes, medium plus tannins, okay? Yeah, so medium plus tannins, high acidity, basically, it could be any of these 4 grapes, okay? All right, now let's look at how Nick sees tannins in red wines. Do you want me to put all of them?
Sure, why don't you go ahead and put all of them up. So the last one, I don't know whether it's the same for you guys, but the name of the variety might be hidden behind the video, which is the last variety is Syrah. So the first thing I would say about the first 3 varieties, the important thing is that they're all Bordeaux varieties. That's where they originally came from. We know that there's not much Malbec in Bordeaux anymore. There is a little bit in Cahors, quite close to Bordeaux, but now, of course, much more famous in Argentina. But nonetheless, Merlot, Cabernet, and Malbec, along with Cabernet Franc and Carmenere, are the 5 Bordeaux varieties. And then Syrah is a completely different animal. It comes from the other side of France. It behaves in a different way altogether. So we'll talk about that in just a second. But I think the sort of general point that Alessandra was making with the previous slide was that pretty much all the aromas and flavors which were on that slide across all the different varieties, you guys mentioned somewhere in your descriptions. So maybe that didn't help you that much. And then trying to narrow it down between medium and high tannin and acidity likewise wasn't necessarily going to kind of narrow down what the grape variety might be. And these were exactly the problems that I had when I was studying for the Master of Wine. And eventually I realized that we had to work a little bit harder on the nature of tannins in red wines and acidity in white wines. So it's what I call tannin structure in red wines and acid structure in white wines. This is really the centerpiece of my book, of what I wrote about. Now, what does it mean? Acid structure and tannin structure. Acid structure is really a question about how the acidity, which is such an important feature of white wines, how the acidity feels when you have the wine on your palate. Not just, oh, it's fresh. Like, I mean, all acidity is fresh. We get that. There's no point in acidity if it's not fresh. But is it tangy or zesty? And is it felt consistently throughout the time the wine spends on your palate? Or do you just feel it at the beginning or just at the end or somewhere in the middle while you have the wine on your palate? So those are the kind of questions I started thinking about white wines. And what I discovered when I was thinking about that was that different varieties, you perceive the acidity in different places, and the acidity has a different quality to it. So to give you an example, Sauvignon Blanc is a kind of spiky acidity. It feels like it's pricking the inside of your mouth. Whereas, let's take another example. This, I guess, the most infamous example that I came up with was Chenin Blanc, which you don't feel much at the beginning when it first hits your palate, but then it gets stronger and stronger. So I compare it to like a crescendo in music where it gets bigger. And so I started obsessing about these very fine details of acid structure in white wines, and I found that to be very helpful. Now, that is a bit abstract and a bit obscure, but I think tannin structure in red wine is much easier to understand what I'm talking about, and it's easy to get that. So it's going to be quite an interesting process today. And the reason I started off by saying these three varieties, Merlot, Cabernet, and Malbec, are all Bordeaux varieties is because Bordeaux varieties, when it comes to tannin structure, all behave in quite a similar way. In tannin structure, I'm really looking for two things, two most important things, which is where you feel the tannin in your mouth, and two, what the tannins feel like, what the texture of those tannins is. Now, what unites all Bordeaux tannins across these varieties is they're always felt on the gums. So if you have a wine where you feel the tannins at the top of your teeth and the bottom, and then around the sides, on the sides of the mouth, but all around the gums, then there's many other varieties where you can feel them on the sides as well, but you should at least think about the possibility that these could come from one of the Bordeaux varieties. Now, a contrast to that is the wine on the far right of the presentation here, which is Syrah, which is not felt so much on the side of the mouth, on the gums. It's felt much more on the tongue. The tannins are felt much more on the tongue. Now, I do need to make one qualification here, which is that, of course, all tannins, especially in more tannic red wines like we're tasting tonight, you feel like the tannins are everywhere, especially after you've been tasting for a while when your palate gets kind of tired. But what I'm talking about is where the real focal point of the tannins is. Where are they felt most strongly, most acutely? And so a really good question for me when I get a full-bodied red wine is, are these tannins on the gums or not? So what do you guys think in this first wine? Do you find them on the gums or on the tongue or in the cheeks or somewhere else? I see we have some contrasting viewpoints here, which is always the way. It's good. By the way, in answer to the question, someone's asked a technical question about oak tannins and grape tannins. I don't want to get into the weeds of this, but if you age a red wine in oak, especially new oak, then that will impart a sensation of tannins as well, which we call oak tannins. They behave in a very similar way to Bordeaux tannins, i.e. they are on the gums and they've got this kind of square structure. It feels like you've got this kind of square of wood splinters in your mouth. And honestly, if you can feel that, then to my mind, that's bad winemaking, and I will criticize that when I'm tasting a wine. Okay, so people are saying, okay, all over the place. So what might be quite interesting, Alessandra, is not to reveal what this wine is, but to have them taste the next wine and see whether they find the tannins in the same place or in a different place.
Okay. So go ahead, guys. If you have wine number 2 in another glass, just taste it and see if you find the tannins in the same place or in a different one. I think the comments are very interesting. So, you know, some people saying back of the tongue, gums and tongue, gums, cheeks. So yeah, very interesting. Okay, so wine number 2.
But the point, you know, one thing I would kind of emphasize is that the point here isn't to get, you know, the perfect answer for each one of these wines. The point is just to begin even thinking along these terms. It's like learning a new language when the first time you encounter this kind of stuff. And I worked with students over this for years, and you know, it took me a long time just to get the hang of it. So it's just learning the language, learning how to perceive these things in the first instance can be helpful.
Right. I totally agree, because, you know, aromas and flavors is something that we have been doing for a long time. And then suddenly to change and try to feel, okay, yes, the tannins are high or they are low, but where are they? So it's a little bit harder. So a couple of you are saying that the tannins are in the tongue. I felt that this tannins, you know, as it got into my mouth, the sensation is different than it is right now. So wait a couple of seconds and try to see where are the tannins located. Because now for me, it is not in the same place that as I have tasted before. Yeah, so that is exactly what Emily is saying, if it is the initial taste or the lingering tannins. So what do you say, Nick? Because for me, it's more the lingering tannins.
You know, one thing that I think is an issue with the kind of wines that we're tasting tonight is that I don't think I'm saying I'm spoiling the game if I say all of these wines tonight have got quite a lot of fruit in them, and some of them will even have a little bit of residual sugar, a very tiny amount, say anywhere between 1 and 3 grams, and both fruit and residual sugar are felt on the tongue. So in fruity wines, we're talking about, I don't know, you know, big red wines from the New World, Malbec, Shiraz, Cabernet, even from riper parts of, say, Italy or Spain or Priorat, places like this. You think, oh my gosh, my tongue is being weighed down so much. It must be the tannins. Often it's not the tannins, it's a combination of sugar and of just the sheer density, the weight of the fruit. So you have to kind of fight your way through that and think where the tannins as opposed to where the fruit is.
I agree. So in the case of wine number 2, as I am tasting the wine, after you spit the wine or you swallow the wine, you have the sensation right here. So it is in the back of your cheeks and in your gums, but in the back. So try to see that, you know, so of course, you know, I'm feeling tannins everywhere, but where are the tannins more concentrated? Where I can feel that the most? And for me, in the case of wine number 2, it's right here. Yes, they are in my tongue as well, but they're not as, you know, the sensation that they give me, it is not as high in the tongue as they are in the back, in the gums.
So Alessandra, I'm not tasting the wines right now, so you have to tell me, everyone tell me, are these wines in terms of body, are they the same weight or is one lighter than the other?
I think they are the same weight. They are
Does everyone
very
agree?
similar. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's interesting. Okay, so should we do wine 3 as well, since we're here?
Sure. Okay, so yeah, a couple of people are saying the second is lighter. And then, you know, I can understand that, but that is in terms of tannin sensation. I wouldn't say it is because of alcohol or because of residual sugar. I think it is the tannin structure and how they feel. So the first one is kind of rougher, and the second one is kind of more velvety, more, you know, kind of So they feel different. Okay, Claudia is saying the second has more residual sugar. It's very fruity. The second wine is very fruity. For residual sugar, not in the technical sheets, they don't say anything. Wine number 1 has 2 grams of residual sugar. Wine number 2, maybe, Shanna, oh, she's not tasting. I was calling, you know, Shanna, Adele, and Zed to reply, you're not tasting. Next time, guys, I have to ship you wines all over the country and the world so you guys can taste. I think there is a little bit of RS. So the way we deal with residual sugar, at least in DipWSET, but I feel that it helps a lot, is by putting your tongue inside your the wine. Do you do that too, Nick?
Yeah, definitely. Yep.
It's not beautiful, but you know, it's very good. So basically what you do is like this. And yes, the wine is very fruity. It has a little bit more residual sugar, maybe 3 grams, 4 grams, but that is almost imperceptible for many people. So yeah, but it is very fruity on the palate as well. All right. Okay, so go ahead and taste wine number 3. And so we can feel this tannin structure in wine number 3, okay?
So all 3 wines, we should say, that we're tasting tonight, for the people who are tasting, are represented in this slide here. And the other thing you can think about when you're tasting as well, this one is not only, now you've got used to looking for where you feel the tannins, you can also think a little bit about what the texture of the tannins is. You can see I've written Alessandra's written the textures on here. So, for instance, the Merlot, the fruit-wrapped tannins, which means that you hardly even feel the tannins in Merlot because it's so wrapped up in the soft, luxuriant, generous fruit which characterizes Merlot. In Cabernet Sauvignon, we're calling it fine-grained, which means that Cabernet has got a grainy kind of tannin, but the grain is very small. It's very tiny. It's very fine. So you don't even really perceive it so much as a grain. A really grainy tannin would be something like Barolo. Malbec, grainy on the gums, more rustic. Malbec tannin can be, it's grainy, but it's not fine grained like Cabernet. The grain's quite big. So you feel it's a little bit coarse, a little bit rustic, perhaps even harsh. And then you can see that for the Syrah and the Shiraz, we've written chalky or powdery. But in really ripe examples, especially from places like Australia, it can be really velvety as well. So that's just something extra to think about.
So then, you know, what I propose is now go back to wine number 1, retaste. So some of you said the tannins are in the gums. Some said, you know, it was in the tongue. So it is the first wine we are tasting, at least for me. You know, I haven't drank any wine today. So always the first wine is the hardest because either you had coffee before or you brush your teeth or you had food. So, you know, go back to wine number 1, try to feel the tannin. And now think about this. Are these tannins fruit wrapped, like Nick said, or are they finely fine grained? So try to feel how you feel the tannins in your mouth.
I think we have narrowed it down to one of the 3 Bordeaux varieties because we've noticed that the tannins are really more on the gums in wine 1.
Fruity, no grains. Okay. Are they, so for those of you who thought the tannins of wine number 1 were in the tongue, are they still in the tongue or now do you feel them in the gums? Okay, Claudia says gums. Okay. Gums for Celeste as well. Okay, good. Gums. Yes, Nancy, I agree. with you about the tannins of wine number 3. Okay, so Mary has changed from cheeks to gum, more on the front. Okay. Nick, can you comment a little bit on the shape of the tannins as well for a couple of these varietals?
Yeah, so Merlot, for instance, we've got down here on the slide, square tannins. What I always think about Merlot as a wine is that it's quite, I mean, of course, we know that some of the best wines in the world from Bordeaux can be Merlot dominant or even Merlot 100%. But in general, the issue with Merlot as a single variety wine is that it's a bit too heavy. It just kind of sits there. It's like it's not going anywhere. It's kind of pregnant. It just occupies space. When you put the wine on your palate, it will just sit there until you swallow or spit. I'm contrasting this to Cabernet, which has always got what I call a sense of direction. It's always going somewhere. It's what I call linear, which means the tannins are like a line. There you go, like an arrow. It's got a sense of direction. And I know the one that Alessandra responds to it as well in Cabernet is this sense of tannins being a horseshoe, which is like they line the gums and then they kind of taper to a point on the finish when you swallow or you spit. So either whether you think it's an arrow in Cabernet or whether you think it's a horseshoe tapering to a point, it's got a sense of direction. It's going somewhere. Malbec, I think, is sort of halfway between Merlot and Cabernet in these terms. I think it does have a more obvious tannin structure than Merlot does, but they're quite hefty, quite firm. I've said rustic. Rustic's a bit pejorative, but they're not quite as polished as Cabernet tannins. So for that reason, they seem a bit more static than Cabernet ever is. So while they are very much felt in the same way Cabernet is, they're perhaps haven't quite got such a sense of movement as Cabernet does. So these are kind of elusive concepts, I know, and you have to think about them and you have to wonder about them. But just in the context of, say, wine 1 that we're tasting, do we feel this wine's got a sense of direction, it's going somewhere, or is it just sitting there like Merlot or Malbec? So 2 people are saying that it's at least one of the wines is Cabernet Sauvignon.
Yeah, I thought that, so when I read that and we were doing a blind tasting and maybe we had a Merlot or something, I felt exactly. So Merlot is like a square, it's heavy and it's heavy in the front. So you taste the wine and suddenly it's like the wine stops in the front and then you see the heaviness of the tannins. And then for Cabernet Sauvignon, it really goes to the back. So it flows to the back. So the sensation is very different. So yeah. So what about wine number 1, guys? What do you think? It's more like the square tannins sitting in front of your mouth, or it's more like, the arrow going into the back of your mouth?
I think part of the sensation as well of the tannins and the sense of direction is wrapped up in acidity. I don't know whether you want me to get into the weeds on this, but I think that's always a relevant discussion when we're talking about Bordeaux varieties, which tend to retain their acidity quite well.
All right. Yeah, should we vote? And then we can continue. I'll go back to the slides, but so some of you think it is a Cabernet Sauvignon, some of you think it is a Merlot. For some of you, it is a square. Some feel around. So I'll put a poll in here so you can vote.
This is democracy, people.
Exactly. How do I do that now? And I did that before, so, okay. But maybe, just a second, guys. I saw this in here. Okay, let me do like this so I can see my screen. You know what? You're the host, Nick. So now the polls are with you.
Okay, polling.
Yes. Select
Okay,
poll number 1. And yes, launch. Okay. So it is anonymous. Okay, please vote. We are not judging. We are all learning. I have done so many mistakes and continue to do so many mistakes in blind tasting. It is very hard. So go ahead, vote and submit. So
well, Alessandra, I can see that very enthusiastic voters. We've got some keen participants in democracy here. That's what I'd like to see.
Okay, good. All right, let's give them a couple more seconds to vote, and then you share the results with us, Nick.
Okay. We've got 70% have voted.
Okay.
So there's 13 of you who have not voted yet. So you have to vote.
Come on, guys.
Although I think I might be a part of that, but I don't know how to vote. So.
Okay.
Okay. So 40 people have voted. So I think we can. Finish.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm going to end the poll.
Drums. Okay. Oh my God.
Hi. Well, who has the deciding vote?
So, Nick, how can you help us? You see, we are all in trouble in here.
Well, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you another question, which is going to help us figure out what the answer is here. The question is, just reply in the chat box, but don't just guess. But if you feel confident that you know which country this wine comes from, write the country in the chat box right now.
Oh, we have a poll for the country too.
Oh, we do? Okay, good.
Yes.
We can do it. We can do it by country as well.
Poll number 2.
Okay, hold on. So we're going to do it by country. Okay, ready?
All right, guys. What is the country of wine number 1? So Paula says Old World. Claudia says New World. Let's see. You can vote.
Okay, we have 66% have voted. It's still close, people. Every vote counts. Do not lose the opportunity to exercise your democracy. It's very close. Okay, so we've got 30, we got 40, okay, 41. Okay, this is your last chance, 5 seconds, last votes. If anyone else wants to vote. We've got 41, 42 now, good. Okay, the tie has been split, which is excellent. Okay, I'm gonna end the poll right now. I'm gonna share the results. Good, very interesting. Alessandra, you want to say something or shall
I? So, you know, tasting blind, I think it is so hard because of this. The wine is super fruity, so of course it could have come from any of these countries, and it could have come from Bordeaux in a warm vintage as well. So that is why, you know, aromas and flavors don't tell us much, and that is why we are all trying to see about the tannins. So in his book, Nick describes also, you know, what to expect from different countries. So maybe, Nick, so the most voted was Argentina. Second most voted was Napa, and then, you know, we have Chile as number 3. So what should we expect from a wine coming from these countries in general?
Well, let's just do the top 3 in terms of votes. So we'll start with Argentina. Argentina, if we're talking about Bordeaux varieties, whether, I mean, it's not really going to be Merlot in Argentina, but it could be Malbec or Cabernet. Either variety is going to be powerful, full-bodied, with high alcohol, 14 to 14.5% on the label. So in reality, probably perhaps even more than that. With tannins, which are not necessarily very polished, very elegant, but they're very powerful. These are quite dry wines. A lot of New World wines we think of as being basically sweet tasting. Argentina makes wines which are on the drier end of the New World spectrum. Can often be a little floral, aromatically, but then the tannin ultimately tends to persist through the finish. So Argentina is really a wine about tannin, I think, above all else. Napa Valley is, I think Napa Valley can be confused for Argentina because they're both very full-bodied, powerful, high alcohol styles. But, and this comes back to the point I was just making, Napa Valley is a sweet fruit tasting wine in a way that Argentina is not. It's sweet, it's glossy, it's very, there's no hard edges ever to Napa Valley. It's very perfectly crafted wines, usually with very supple, melting tannins. You can't really confuse the tannins of Napa Valley to Argentina. Argentina, rugged, dry, strong. Napa Valley, they're not soft, but they're so seamless and velvety and integrated into the fruit. The final one I'm going to talk about here is Chile, because it came in third. Chile is certainly lighter than the other 2, Napa Valley and Argentina. Chile, usually, even the best examples are only medium bodied. So even though it's right next to Argentina, the wines are a very different style. Chile has got a lot of freshness in its red wines, a lot of acidity. So these are medium bodied, very fresh wines, often quite aromatic, and with that real sense of Cabernet linearity and direction. So one of those answers is correct, one in the top 3. Alessandra, do you want to?
Yeah, so guys, I was typing as Nick was talking. So here is the full thing that he says. So first of all, full body or medium body, and then, you know, more freshness and aromatic, or more or dry or sweet fruit tasting. So try to, you know, to differentiate, try to feel that. Hi, Sarah. So I think, Nick, yeah, I want to comment, but I don't want it to, you know, run over.
Do you want to reveal the identity of wine 1 after we've done the others?
Yeah.
Okay. So shall we do the exact same thing and do the region for wines 2 and 3? And the varieties.
Okay, you don't want to review? Yeah, we are tortured them. We can review.
Okay, they want to be revealed. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so wine 1 is from Chile. Here it is.
Yes, and now you can remove the black paper, guys. It is the Cabernet Sauvignon from Chile. Let me unwrap my bottle so I can show you, for those of you who are not tasting with us.
By the way, guys, just say whether you like the wine or not. Just say yes or no in the chat box whether you actually liked this wine actively. Good. No, I see a lot of positivity about this wine, because a lot of people, for reasons I don't necessarily always understand, really don't like Chile, and so it's always good to put it in a blind tasting and have people enjoy the wine.
I know. I really thought this wine was going to be green, herbaceous, peppery, and the wine has none of that. You know, it does have the freshness on the palate that you talked about, so I can see the freshness. But you know, in a blind tasting, yes, most people will never say it is Chile because you don't have that extreme green bell pepper, jalapeno type of pepper.
And is it? I'm not tasting the wine, so I'm asking you, Alessandra. Is it medium bodied or is it more of a powerful blockbuster style?
So every time that I think about body, I always compare to a Lodi Zen.
Yeah.
So no, this is not as near as a Lodi Zen. So it is, you know, from the three in here, maybe it is the lightest one, I would say. So
right.
yes, more medium plus body.
Without tasting the wine, that's what I would expect. And I always think about that in connection with the acidity that Chile has. And the acidity also gives a sense of energy and life to the wine. So when you combine that with only a medium-bodied wine, you actually get a lot of, there's no heaviness to Chilean Cabernet, which is what I really enjoy about it.
So Adele was asking about the vintage. So it is 2016, and 2016 actually was kind of a weird vintage for Chile because first they had a lot of rain, and then with the El Niño system, they had, you know, kind of a dry and hot summer. And I was reading an article at the Cantor magazine, and they compared this to really, you know, the most Bordeaux-like vintage in Chile. So yes, so but yeah, really low yields. Yields were down by 30%. But yeah, I think this is a really well-made wine.
Okay, so shall we ask about the variety in wine too?
Sure. So, okay. Any questions? We have a poll again. Let me go to the slide. Any questions about this wine, guys? So this is Miguel Torres. So, you know, it's the Spanish producer that has been producing wine in Penedès and in the Catalonia area of Spain for centuries. They established in Chile in 1979. This wine is actually 100% organic vineyards, is what they say. So it should be organic grapes. I don't know if I see something in here.
I mean, a lot of Chile is organic anyway, just because there's not too many pests and diseases.
Right. And then something else. Oh, okay. So something else about Miguel Torres is that he's using old grapes now. So he has actually a sparkling wine made with Pais grape. Really interesting. I tasted this wine before, and it is traditional method, delicious wine. So yes, Spanish families established in Chile since the 1979. So yep, good wine. And this case, the wine cost $20.
Good deal.
Yeah, and just to show you where this wine is coming from. So this is actually from the Maipo Valley, which is this yellow area on the map. So you can see it is very close to Santiago in here. And in this case, the vineyards are very close to the Andes. So they have a little bit of more elevation. So yes, it is not very close to the sea. It's closer to the Andes, but it's the Maipo Valley close to Santiago. All right, so we are back at this, and then we go to, so, you know, if you want to go and taste wine number 2, retaste again before we vote and poll. And you can cheat and look at this table in here before.
Okay, I'm going to put up the poll right now for the variety.
All right, let's see.
Okay, all 4 varieties are getting some votes.
Okay, some people say Cab, some people say Syrah.
Some people are not afraid about admitting who they voted for. Someone said that the wine is very chalky, which is an interesting comment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we've had 35 votes. So there should be another 3 or 4 of you who haven't voted. If you want to go ahead and vote now with just another 10 seconds. Okay, we're going to call it quits there. Okay, we're going to end the poll. I'm going to show you what the results are. We do have a clear winner on this one.
Okay.
So people are going on the Malbec route for this wine. And I think Celeste is, maybe she's offering the reason why people think that it might be Malbec, more grainy. Perhaps you also feel the tannins are more powerful than the previous wine. Would that be accurate? Yes. Yeah, so I mean, would you say that this wine is a bigger wine all round than the previous wine in terms of tannins and body, maybe alcohol?
Yes. Has more fruit, more body, more tannins, more everything, more alcohol. Yeah.
What might that tell you? We're going to do an origin question in a minute, but what might that tell you about the kind of climate that it comes from? Yeah, a warmer climate than the previous wine, which is why it's super fun to taste these wines in comparison to each other. So we know that Chile is a cooler country in terms of it's more of a moderate climate in the New World. It's probably warmer than, say, New Zealand is in terms of New World countries. But in terms of your next question, which is going to be where this comes from, you might want to think about places that are warmer than Chile for your region of origin. So let's not reveal the variety. Let's go right on to the region of origin, and then we'll do both together. Does that make sense, Alessandra?
Yep, sure.
Okay. So well, let's remember that second in that was Merlot as well, after the Malbec. So a lot of people, the people who wrote Malbec, of course, are going to have to more or less have to go to Argentina. So it's like a slate vote here. Okay, so there's really 2 front runners in this vote, which is quite interesting. Like half of you have voted so far. Someone's saying Syrah from Australia. Someone's saying Cab from Australia. So you got 2 votes for Australia, but then the people are saying Malbec. I mean, I guess there is some Malbec in Australia, but not very much. I mean, really, if you're going to have a New World country for Malbec, it's going to be Argentina for sure. Okay, so we're going to give it another 10 seconds to see whether we can get up to 40 voters. We've got 36 so far. Okay, final votes right now. Okay, I'm going to end the poll right now, and I'm going to show you the results.
Oh, okay.
So this is actually pretty interesting because, but essentially the first vote saying that Malbec was the winner and the second vote saying Australia is the winner, they don't really make sense together.
Right.
But one of them is right. But which one?
Do you want to change your answer somehow, guys? Do you want to change the grape or change the region? Okay, so Rob says yes. Okay. There's no way to change in the poll, so you can write down on the text box. I think this wine represents the grape and the region so much, and I tick every box for this wine. So
the only thing about this region is that it's not a very well-known region. And I don't know how much of it we see in the US and even perhaps in other countries. Certainly you'd see plenty of it in the country where it comes from, but maybe not exported so much as I wish, because I love this region. So shall we put them out of their agony?
Yes. All right, guys. So the wine is, okay, we are getting South Africa in here now. Okay, this is a Cabernet Sauvignon from Coonawarra in Australia. Yep. Right country, wrong variety. Yeah, I know. So the reason that I say this is textbook Cabernet from Coonawarra for me, so of course it is super fruity, right? So it is a warm region in Australia, but you do get this eucalyptus on the palate. So then again, talking about flavors, but you have this eucalyptus, and for me, the tannins stay here in the back of the palate. So almost, in the gums in here. So that is why I say yes, Cabernet Sauvignon, and then Australia. You have these very ripe tannins. They are at least medium plus in tannins, if not high, but they are very ripe tannins, and so much of the eucalyptus on the palate. So yes, yeah.
Yeah, and I think we did a really good job talking about the difference in climate, in difference between the body weight of the Chile and the Australian wine. We've simply got a very warm climate here in South Australia, and it's not that the wine isn't fresh or it doesn't have acidity. It has plenty of all of that, but it's just a much more full-bodied, powerful wine than the cooler Chilean example. But I think nonetheless, it still shows those directional linear Cabernet tannins. And by the way, I might be the only person on this webinar who understands what cricket is. Is anyone a cricket expert apart from me?
So do you want to explain the name? Cover drive.
The cover drive is a shot. Is a play in cricket. It's a type of stroke though with the bat. It's quite a sophisticated stroke though. Only good players can do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so to talk a little bit about this family. So it is family business, third generation. They were producing Riesling in Clare Valley. So, a little bit further north in South Australia. And now they are producing wines in Coonawarra. So in this case, 100% Cabernet Sauvignon. They say French oak in the tech sheet, but I don't know how long. So that is why I put aging in a question mark. 14% alcohol. Yes, 2016 vintage, and they're in Coonawarra. They have a very typical type of soil, which is called terra rossa, which is the soils we find in a lot of places in the Mediterranean. So it's basically a layer of clay, and this iron-rich clay, which has a lot of iron. And then you have limestone in here, which limestone is very porous, so this absorbs the water. So this is a very typical soil called terra rossa, and you find it in Coonawarra. And Cabernet Sauvignon is king in Coonawarra. I would say is yes, the main.
I would make the point that Coonawarra is a very famous region for Cabernet, not just in Australia but in the world. But it's a small region. It's not half the size of Bordeaux or anything like that. It's a very small region, and these very special soils are just in a small area. And probably, I don't know, but maybe as much Cabernet is made in Western Australia, in Margaret River, as is made here in Coonawarra. Probably, to be honest with you, probably more down there in Margaret River. And it's a very different style. Coonawarra, to me, is warm climate Australian Cabernet, whereas Margaret River is a bit fresher, a bit more leafy. But the great thing I think about Coonawarra, I do have a soft spot for Australian wines in general, so I'm a little bit biased, but I do think that Coonawarra, in spite of the body and the richness of the wine, which you just tasted, nonetheless, it's fresh, it's drinkable. You can have more than, a glass or two. You can enjoy it with pleasure. And that's what I think is so cool about these warm climate sites in Australia. They managed to retain the freshness really well.
Yep. Okay, so let me see in here. Yeah, we have a couple of British people in here. So Mike and Paula has the Scottish husband. And then, yeah, so always, in all webinars, we have to talk about England somehow because either they invented sparkling wines or they did the bottles, or so England comes back. And now, yeah, Sarah, where's Sarah in here? And now it comes back to cricket. So yes. Okay, guys. So what do you think about the wine? Did you like it? It is $19.99 for this wine.
I mean, as a general comment, as a kind of commercial comment, what I would say is that there's a ton of stuff going on in the world and the economy right now. But one thing that's for sure, and it always happens when we have these economic tough times, is that the US dollar gets stronger. It gets stronger because it's a lender of last resort and everyone piles into the dollar, which means that the exchange rate for the dollar is very strong against other currencies, which means that imported wine can often be very, very good value at times like this.
Yeah, agreed. So yeah, some people say they like this much more than the number one. Some people did not like it. Very herbaceous. So yeah, I think it is very typical of Coonawarra to have this eucalyptus freshness on the palate. I kind of like it. I think it, it's nice and smooth, and for $19 is great.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other, the leafy kind of herbaceous comment, I think is accurate for Australian wines with Cabernet. I think Cabernet really is a leafy herbaceous variety, and Napa Valley is one of the few places on earth that have managed to sort of quell that tendency in the variety. But I think it is what Cabernet naturally wants to do. And I think Australian winemakers have the philosophy of, that's how it is. So we're not going to try and change it and take it or leave it. And I kind of respect that, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. I like it very, very much. All right. So let's go into wine number 3, guys. I'm trying to keep you on time in here because Nick has to go in about 10 minutes. So, all right, retaste wine number 3. Okay, now you learned a ton. Change your answers. Think about that again. Okay, where are the tannins in your tongue, in the sides of your tongue? Do they do they act like a wall, or do they go in the back of your mouth? Again,
Just go back to the slide, Alessandra.
Yeah.
Go back to the slide with the descriptions on. Wine 3.
So Paco says it's too spicy. Yeah, it is very, very spicy. And that is the oak. This wine has a lot of oak, much more than the previous ones. So you feel that cinnamon, nutmeg, even the toastiness of the wine. Yeah, a lot of spices in here. Okay.
Yeah, you have to be really careful. I mean, some of us are wine professionals who are on here tonight. Some of us are just wine enthusiasts. But certainly one of the key things as a wine professional to do when you're tasting very young wines, maybe wines out of barrel or en primeur wines, which haven't even been bottled yet, is to pay attention to the oaking regime very strongly, because oak imparts many more flavors than you would first think. You would think, oh, it's kind of toast or vanilla or maybe dill in American oak, that kind of thing. But in fact, it can add that real strong spice that you're talking about, even the exotic spice. I remember very vividly being it's happened to me twice now. I was in one cellar in Vosne Romanée, and I was in one cellar in Gevrey-Chambertin, both in Burgundy, of course. And Pinot Noir, which likes oak to some extent, but not like in the same way that Cabernet does. I was like, wow, these are so spicy wines. And the winemaker both times apologized to me. He said, I'm sorry, this isn't a good sample. I took it out of the new oak barrel. and I haven't blended the wine yet. So he has some oak which is new and some which is old, and that's not the final version of the one I got. So you have to be sensitive that, yes, we might expect some things from Cabernet, some spice elements, but not so much as you would get from oak. Okay, so I'm going to give you 10 more seconds to vote. I feel people are a little cautious on this. We've only got 32 votes. Usually we get up to 40, so maybe people are less sure about this one.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it. Yes, get those votes in now. I'm going to give you another 5 seconds. Final votes. Okay, we're done. Okay, and I'm going to share those results right now.
Okay.
So we've had, you know, 2 Cabernets already, and so you guys, if you're calling another Cabernet the 3rd in a row, then you should be pretty confident now about what a Cabernet tastes like, I would think. So so let's not talk about what the variety is until we do, I think, the next poll, and then we'll talk about both together. Do you agree, Alessandra?
Yep. Let's go.
Okay.
Can you launch the next poll?
Yes. Okay, we've got some pretty quick and enthusiastic voting here. A lot of confidence, I believe, is on display in this one.
That's good. Maybe they learned something, right?
Well, there seems to be some hedging going on here. No one thinks that you're going to put in 2 Chilean Cabernets.
Right.
But I know you, Alessandra, anything is possible.
True. Okay. Oh yeah, slide says number 2. Okay, I'm just in the wrong. All right. Yes. Now number 3. Thanks, Don.
Okay, give it another 10 seconds. 10 more seconds to vote.
Okay, and for some people maybe are not texting because they are watching on TVs. So some people are saying Napa Cab, USA Napa Cab, rounded, more elegant wine. Okay.
Okay, here are the results.
Okay. Wow.
Okay, so a strong lead there for Napa, and obviously, if you're a Napa, there are other grapes grown there, but you know the vast majority of Napa Valley is Cabernet, clearly. So, do you want to reveal what the wine is, Alessandra?
Yes. All right. So great job, guys. We are in Napa Valley. This is Silver Ghost Cabernet Sauvignon Napa Valley 2017. So excellent job.
So I guess I want to know from the participants what really took them to Napa Valley Cab. What was really the standout features of the wine that made it obvious that's what it was, because everyone seemed pretty confident about that one. Someone says oak and spices. Yeah, I mean, certainly Napa Valley is very generous with its oak use. There's so much fruit in Napa Valley Cabernet that it can easily absorb pretty much any amount of new oak that you want to apply to it. Cooler regions, of course, don't have so much fruit, so they're going to rein back on the oak. But yeah, oak is a big feature of young Napa Valley Cabernet. It integrates with time, but in a young wine like this, then sure. Very fruity one area around a velvety pyridines and oak. I'm not tasting this wine. So did you find it did have some pyridines and it was kind of a little bit green and herbaceous?
So it is a very fruity wine. It does has some freshness and some green aromas, but not, you know, too much. The wine is still very ripe and very fruity. Now, this wine for me was a textbook Cabernet Sauvignon from Napa Valley, and I think everybody would agree with me. So first of all, the tannins do go to the back of your palate. The tannins are very polished. So some people were saying, you know, velvety. Yes, and that is the sensation. So for me, the word in here is polished tannins. They are there. They are quite high, but they are so polished. And then, you know, super fruity, a little bit of freshness. In here, you see that it is a blend. So it is not 100% Cab. When I got the technical sheet, I saw that it was 90% Cabernet Sauvignon. So you have a little bit of Cabernet Franc, which adds a little bit of peppery and green aromas. And then you have Petit Verdot for the spices and the color as well. And it comes from actually warmer areas within the Napa Valley AVA. So Calistoga, Rutherford, Yountville, all these areas are very warm. You get the balance between, you know, the fog and the cooler nights, but during the day, these are pretty hot areas, okay? All right.
Actually, you know, 2017 was, of course, the vintage of the fires. And even before the fires, it was a pretty warm vintage. And so, I mean, you know, the kind of thing that wine geeks like me think about is the acidity in this wine natural, or has the winemaker added it? Because if you're getting freshness in a wine like this, I really want to know where it's coming from.
And you talked a little bit in the book about how to differentiate the acidity from the fruit and the acidity when tartaric acid was added.
Well, I think if you get a wine like wine one, for instance, which the Chilean example, you have high acidity, but it's also only a sort of medium bodied wine. And you put those two together and it makes perfect sense, because you're picking at a date which is early enough where you can retain the acidity. But if you also pick that early, you're never going to have that abundant, juicy, generous fruit that the Napa Valley example has. So my question is with Napa Valley is, if you're harvesting on the 15th of October or something, which they weren't in 2017, by the way, because there was a heat spike and they were harvesting at the end of September. If you're harvesting later, then how do you preserve that acidity, which goes down, you know, the longer the hang time is? So I'm always trying to find logical reasons for why things taste like they do. So if you have a wine in a warm vintage like 2017, which has got a ton of acidity, I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And ultimately for the consumer, it doesn't matter. It's just for wine geeks like us. As long as the consumer appreciates the final product.
Yeah. Actually, so this was the year of the wildfires in California. So a lot of people did not do 2017 vintage, and you know, in here they harvest the grapes and they did it. So 22 months aging in French barriques, 50% new. So that is why we feel so much of the oak barrels. It is really powerful. And just a quick story about Silver Ghost. So the price point of this wine is $35, $40. So yes, Napa is always expensive when you want to show a good example of it. So Silver Ghost, the founder of this winery, actually his great-grandfather was a very, you know, worked in the automobile or for the automobile legislation. And his favorite car was a 1909 Rolls Royce Silver Ghost. And he was friends with Charles Rolls and Henry Royce. And so he, you know, the great-grandson wanted to pay an homage. And so that is why it's called Silver Ghost. Okay, so that is the story of the wine.
Yeah, I just, Jacqueline's making an interesting comment about the color of the wine, which I assume is a pretty deep color, and Napa Valley wines are usually quite a deep color. And she's making the comment that Petit Verdot, PV Petit Verdot, the 5%, which is in here, could have contributed to the color of the wine, because Petit Verdot is a very deeply colored red variety. And that absolutely could be the case. But remember, in Napa Valley, the Cabernet has got very thick skins. Cabernet is always a thick-skinned variety, which is why Cabernet wines usually have quite a good color, because the anthocyanins, which are the color particles, they come from the skins of the grapes. It could come from the Petit Verdot, but equally the Cabernet and the Cabernet Franc would also have thick skins in Napa Valley, so they could contribute color as well. Petit Verdot, if people are curious, Petit Verdot is usually added to a blend for two things: one, for acidity, and 2, for a touch of spice. It's always considered the seasoning of a Bordeaux blend. And Cabernet Franc adds a little bit of the similar qualities, a bit of acidity, but also a bit of a herbal, spicy, tea-like quality, more lifted than Petit Verdot or Cabernet ever is.
Okay, reminds me of Newcastle Brown Ale. I have no idea what you're talking about.
I'm not sure that's a compliment.
Right. Okay, is this Samantha talking or is this Mike talking? Because I know, he might be there.
It's a rich and dark ale from the north of England.
Oh, yeah? Okay, Brit humor. Okay. Yeah, okay, so yes, I think this was, really helpful blind tasting. It is not easy, but you guys did very well in the last wine. Again, I think this was a textbook Napa Valley wine. So Marcos is asking when's the next webinar. And then we had a comment in here from Patra saying, let's do the next blind tasting 3 whites. Let's try Nick's acid test. So Nick, they are requesting that you come back.
I'm sure, I think I can do that. I've got plenty of time on my hands right now, like we all do.
Right. Okay. So, but for next time, we'll have to plan in advance so I can send Nick the wines as well, and then we can taste together. So guys, yes, and in here we finished with a beautiful picture of Napa Valley. Yes, Nick, if you want to say a few words.
No, I think you guys did great. I think you seem to understand my crazy concepts, which I think are very personal to me, but I'm glad that they resonate with other people. And I've always been very surprised about how people respond positively to something which I thought was just me and my crazy mind. So I hope that's been interesting and useful. And certainly, like I said at the top, tannin structure in red wine is one thing. Acid structure in white wines is quite a different thing. Maybe more abstract, but if you guys want to do that, then I'm sure Alessandra would be game for it, and so would I.
Yeah, of course. So first, buy the book, okay, available on Amazon, Beyond Flavor by Nick Jackson, Master of Wine. So next week, we do have 2 webinars. I'm going to present California Dreaming, because, I'm dreaming of going to California, but this is just a dream. We cannot go. So it is going to be California Dreaming, and Nicole will present Aromas of White Wines. And yeah, so, keep in touch with Nick and see how, when he can come back, and so we can do the white wines.
Fantastic. Sounds great, Alessandra. Thank you.
All right. Stay safe, guys. Thank you so much for joining us, and see you next time. Nick, thanks a million. We always learn so much from you. Thanks for the book. Thank you for helping us out in here, and thank you for being with us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Alessandra.
All right. Bye, guys. Happy Friday. All right. And Nick, you were, as the host, you have to end the meeting in here.